This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for another edition of the Primetime Podcast here on Most Valuable Podcast. If you're new to the show, this is where you get all your college football, college basketball. Maybe we'll do college baseball one day. Maybe.
I don't think so.
Maybe we'll do the College World Series. I don't know. The future can hold anything, but mainly we do football and basketball here in the world of college sports. We have a special treat for you guys. Before I get to that, though, a little bit of house cleaning. If you have not already, go down to the description, check out our Patreon page. We've revamped the Patreon goals for you guys. And if you're not sure what Patreon is, it's a way for you guys to support us rather than watchable on top of watching these videos. We revamped our rewards for you guys so that you guys can go check that out, get a little bit. One's a Patreon podcast. Another is call-in segments, so you can call in and talk about college football with Brandon and I if you choose. You could also choose the fast break and onside kick. That's my bit of house cleaning, though. I have to pump the Patreon page.
And let me just take a minute.
Okay.
All right. We're going to give you a second. Go and look at the link. We'll give you a minute. So go and look at it. It's different. If you've done this before, if you've already looked at it, and now we know, take a look.
It's on the right-hand side.
Give you 5 seconds.
Sorry to our Blog Talk listeners right now. I have to wait.
All right. You're back, and we're ready to roll.
And what we are doing today, special edition, is we're kind of doing a mock draft. We're reacting basically to my mock draft, my preseason mock draft. I finally am coming out with it. But we're not reacting to it in the sense that you are used to. Brandon and I are the college side of things. Mark and I are the NFL side of the things. So today we're going to show you the mock draft. However, Brandon and I are going to talk mainly about the prospects today, about the players that are in the mock draft, not necessarily where they're fitting into NFL teams, because that's Mark and my job to do later in the year after these teams are already tired of veterans that could be leaving or they're trying to trade people. Well, we know trades never happen by the trade deadline in the
No,
NFL,
not
but
at all,
we would like to
NFL.
hope that one day it does. But how we do it, we're splitting it up into 3 segments for you guys on YouTube. The full thing is on Blog Talk Radio /Primetime Podcast. And I'm going to read off right now here the top 10 picks that we're going to get into today. Number 1, the 49ers. Also, this order is a combination of Mark and myself's combined records for the NFL this year, our prediction. So that's where we got the order. Number 1, the 49ers drafting Sam Darnold out of USC, not UFC, USC. Then we got the New York Jets taking Josh Rosen. The Chicago Bears taking Mike McGlinchey out of Notre Dame. I hope I said that name right. Probably didn't. We got the Browns at number 4 taking Saquon Barkley, the running back from Penn State. Jaguars going Josh Allen. The quarterback, Bills go Minka Fitzpatrick from Alabama. Chargers going Christian Wilkins from Clemson. The Rams go Ardon Key from LSU. We got the Broncos going Tavares McFadden, the cornerback from Florida State. And rounding out this top 10, the Carolina Panthers going Calvin Ridley, the wide receiver out of Alabama. And Brandon, there are a few guys that we have kind of highlighted here that we're going to hit. We're not going to hit every single player within this. We've got some bullet points, some guys that we want to talk about. And the first one, mainly because he's kind of on his own, and he's a little high in my mock draft to some people. I want to ask you this. Saquon Barkley, we've talked about him. We mentioned him in the Penn State preview. He's been a big guy whenever we bring up Penn State. I want to ask you this. Coming into this season that starts this Saturday for college football, big weekend, can't wait. Could Saquon Barkley at the end of this year be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft?
Yeah, he really could. And the reason I say that with pretty much certainty,
with conviction,
is because if you take a look at where he was, and I know that that stats from past years are one thing, and what he does this year is going to be another, but you have to take a look at his progression, and that will show you then where he could be this year. So in year 1, 2015 with Penn State, played in 11 games, had 182 carries, 1,076 yards, 7 touchdowns on the ground, 1 through the air on 20 receptions. All right, that's great. That's your freshman campaign. Really good, very formidable. What can you do year 2? So he comes out year 2 last year as a sophomore, 14 games, so he plays in 3 more games, 272 carries, 1,496 rushing yards, 18 rushing touchdowns, and then on 28 receptions, he has 4 touchdowns, a total of 22 touchdowns on the season. Now, Ricky, that's a huge jump from freshman to sophomore seasons. And now his ceiling is so high for his junior campaign. Could we see 22 touchdowns on the ground and 25 overall touchdowns? I mean, the sky's the limit for this guy. And he is so talented. He's so shifty. He's so quick. He's very, very good. And when you take a look then, I know this is you and Mark, any team, any NFL team is going to probably want a guy like that who can run the ball well, who can catch out of the backfield. This is a guy who could be a very, very, very good running back. And now, could top 5 be a stretch? You know, I still don't think so. But top 10, certainly. If he has a season, even if he repeats the season he had this past year, he'll be in the top 10, without a doubt in my mind.
And to me, the top 10 is not really out of the picture for him. And the reason why I say that is the exact thing that you mentioned right now, the fact that, he can run the ball, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. We had a running back who could do those same things, come out, get drafted 8th overall. Some thought it was kind of a bit of a reach from the Panthers when they took Christian McCaffrey in the first round.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
This past year. To me, with the running backs, and I don't want to harp on both of them because we're going to get to the second guy I'm going to mention later in this mock draft because he is going to be picked later in my mock draft. But the thing that I think this season comes down to when it comes to who's going to be the best running back in this draft class, and everything is up for question because there are concerns, players don't have to come out necessarily. This is what we're thinking right now in the preseason. It comes down to Barkley or Geis. Which one is going to do better? And I mean, right now, I feel like I'm leaning with Barkley majorly because of the fact that his team is going to do better. And when I say do better, I mean LSU is kind of handcuffed in a way because they're playing in the same division as Alabama. And I'm sorry, Alabama's making the playoff. Like, there is no way that Alabama misses the playoff this year. I know I just pissed off all of Tiger Nation. I'm sorry, but that's just how I see it this year. Whereas Penn State, they're going to be in a 3-team race with Michigan and with Ohio State to be the representative. And I'm not trying to backhand Wisconsin when I say this, but the winner of the Big Ten most likely is coming out of the Big Ten Beast this year, as I like to call it. They're going to be in a 3-dog race with the Buckeyes and the Wolverines. So that's why I feel like the national spotlight might be more so on Barkley, which may help him when we get to drafts and when we're doing everything. I know that like this could be a conversation of, who do you take, Saquon Barkley, or do you take Darius Geis? That's the kind of question that we're going to be answering because, yes, Barkley can do it both. He can catch the ball, he can run the ball, and he had 5.5 yards per carry last season. That's right around the 6 yards that you want your running back to have, where Geis, I'm looking right now, averaged 8.7 yards per carry in 2015, 7.6 in 2016. So Geis gets a little bit more yards on it, and that's just the style that he runs with. I feel like that's the question we're going to have when we talk about Barkley and Geis, but I'm top 5 right now. I'll be honest, the only reason I have him in there is I could see the Browns going at him because I am not a huge fan of Isaiah Crowell. I know you are. You said you traded for him in your fantasy league, but that's why I have him right now in top 5. He's going to be a top 10 pick, though, when we get there. I want to ask you about the only other single guy we have in this top 10, though, a guy that is near and dear to your heart because he plays for your Alabama Crimson Tide. We've talked about him before on the primetime. I have him at number 10 going to the Panthers. Calvin Ridley. What do you expect from Ridley coming into 2017?
Calvin Ridley, I see some really good things for him, and I see some good things for him because he's the guy now. Ardarius Stewart is gone. Calvin Ridley is going to be the guy because who else is gone? O.J. Howard. He's also gone. He's now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Ridley is going to be leaned upon to do more than just be a deep threat. He's going to have to, I think, pick up some of those routes over the middle. He's going to have to do some of the crossing routes. When we talked about Calvin Ridley earlier in the summer, this is the same type of thing I said with him, which is why he is going to be leaned upon so much more. So his numbers from the last couple of years, they're going to show that's going to be great, but he's going to be doing so much more this year. So I expect his numbers to be even better because he's going to be leaned upon basically in a bigger role for Jalen Hurts.
Bigger stats, more volume. It's going to be more stats because of more volume.
Absolutely. That's how I would see it playing out. And Jalen Hurts is going to be looking for him early and often. I'm not saying that Alabama doesn't have anyone else, but when you want to just scope in on one guy, and Calvin Ridley is your guy who's been there for a while, that's the guy who you're going to lean upon. That's the guy that you know is your go-to. Well,
and the thing that I think about when go ahead.
I was just going to say I had a pause and I was thinking about it again. Is that that's why even back when we talked about it, I could see Calvin Ridley being one of, if not the top receiver coming out this next year for the draft because he's going to be so multi-dimensional going to a team, especially after this year when I think he's going to be asked to do a whole lot more than what he's done in the past. And if he succeeds and excels in that spot doing that, a team's going to love to see that.
Well, and the thing I'm looking at is right now kind of the top receivers that could challenge him for the top receiver spot when we get to the draft. And here's just what I see before I get into Ridley. The next one down, I'm looking right now at Mel Kiper and his top 10 each positional rankings. He has the top 10 for each position. Number 2, he has behind him in Christian Kirk. The thing that I think will hurt Kirk when it gets to the draft is, yeah, he's tough. Yeah, he can do this, but he hasn't played in an NFL system. He hasn't run the NFL route tree. How is that going to affect? Now, you can go to the combine, you can prove that wrong, but right now that's a negative. DJ Clark, kind of the same thing at LSU that we're dealing with Calvin Ridley of, okay, you've got Dupree gone, you've got Durrell gone. What are you going to do now that you're going to get more targets? That's going to kind of create a rivalry within the SEC. And then another SEC receiver, he's not even going to get to play week 1 because of a suspension, Antonio Callaway.
Yeah.
I wonder if he will have, how much the off-the-field concern will scare NFL scouts when we get to the draft. I know right now it's so early that people could forget about it, but I don't know how he's going to compare to Ridley. And now getting to Ridley, the main guy that we're talking about here in the top 10, my only concern for him is when corners press him, when he's in press coverage, because open field, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
Nightmare on the outside, has the acceleration, and the thing I love about him is like, give me a wide receiver who's willing to block, and I'll draft him. Because you throw your body at the guy. Don't just go, oh, I'm blocking you. Oh. But my only concern is, what are you going to do in press coverage? Because when you get to the next level, they're bigger, faster, stronger than the cornerbacks in college. So what are you going to do when an NFL cornerback starts to press you and starts to rough you at the line? Because if that kind of knocks you off your game a little bit, NFL defensive coordinators will pick up on that, and they will send their corners at you to press coverage. So that's the only thing I want to see from Calvin Ridley coming into this year. What do you think, though, real quickly, when you think about him compared to the other wide receivers, kind of like what I mentioned, mainly like Kirk, Clark, all of them are SEC now that I think about it?
Well, I think that, again, the reason why I want to say I love Callaway. I really like Antonio Callaway. I think that he's a really great wide receiver. I think he's a wonderful deep threat. And that's where I see Callaway. He is the deep bomber.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put him too much in a Ted Ginn type of role because, you're each of you is your each individual unique receiver. But he's that like Brandon Cooks. Like Brandon Cooks ain't usually catching, a 7-yarder across the middle. He catching a 70-yarder down the sidelines. And that's where I see kind of Antonio Callaway. And the reason why I think that would put Ridley, especially after this season, apart from Callaway, is that Ridley is going to have to do more than just that. That won't be enough. That won't be enough. That won't satisfy what Alabama's offense will need. We saw in the last 2 years for Calvin Ridley. In year 1, he was just shy of 90 receptions on the year, over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. Year 2, less receptions, 72, less yards, 769, same amount of touchdowns, but he also had a rushing touchdown as well. So we had 7 freshman year, 8 in his sophomore year. I think we see him at 90, maybe even plus receptions, over 1,000 yards, and certainly repeating on that 7 touchdown mark. And the reason, again, like I mentioned, that puts him separate from Callaway and that puts him, I think, Ridley in a different league is, as Antonio Callaway, I see him as the deep threat, the just big bomber. Ridley is that, but he is more. And he's quicker across the middle. And I think that's going to help him, and that's going to put him apart, set him apart from the Antonio Callaways and the rest of the guys in the SEC.
And I know I said I wouldn't do it, but forgive me here. That's why I had him going to the Panthers, because could you imagine him as the number 2 with Kelvin Benjamin over the middle of the field? A little quick option. Well, wait, Kelvin Benjamin needs to stay on the field first. Ha, ha, ha. There's an injury joke.
He will. I
hope
him
so.
too.
I had him in fantasy last year, and he screwed me. But the other guys, really quickly, we have 3 other guys that I want to get to. The first one, these are the defensive guys in this top 10. First one, Ardon Key. And I mentioned him a while ago here on the Primetime Podcast the week that I took the solo cast, where I can't remember what you were doing, but you couldn't make the podcast. No, this was way before Florida, that you couldn't make the podcast. And my thing about Ardon Key,
probably another Florida trip.
Maybe. The thing about Ardon Key is because in my top 5, it's all offensive guys, mainly because of the quarterbacks. And if you want to hear us talk about the quarterbacks, Brandon and I kind of decided we've talked about them enough. So if you want to talk, you want us to hear us talk about them, I'll put all the videos we've talked about the quarterbacks down below in the description. You guys can go ahead and check them out. But Ardon Key, I have him at 8. Don't have him in the top 5. I have all offensive players in the top 5. I'll ask you this. Could he, as a pass rusher for LSU, be dynamic and good enough this season to be a top 5 pick this year in the draft? Like, I do not have him right now.
Yeah, I think so, Ricky. And the reason I say that is because he has 16 sacks in 2 seasons. And was he not injured for part of last year?
Yes, he was.
You get him help.
He was injured, and then this whole offseason, we weren't sure if he was coming back, but he is now.
You get a healthy Ardon Key. You get a healthy Ardon Key back. Get the entire season with him being healthy. That is a force for LSU. That is a guy who is a very good pass rusher. Very good pass rusher. I mean, his name has been brought up multiple times when you're talking about defense. Not just SEC defense, but defense.
Period.
I think that he could be a great pick for somebody in those top rounds if you are looking for a guy to be a pass rusher. I mean, we've seen what the New York Football Giants have done with going with Olivier Vernon and Jason Pierre-Paul, and how important that is when both of them are healthy, how much of a difference that makes. You get a guy in there like an Ardon Key who can one day be your Jason Pierre-Paul, just with maybe all of his limbs. I think that is something any team, especially in bad shape for defense, would want.
And I'm trying to do a little bit of quick research on the fly, which isn't usually the best way to do things. I just went 3 years back, so 17, 16, and 15. There has been a defensive end. Dante Fowler Jr., Joey Bosa, 3 each. Myles Garrett this past year, all top 3 picks in the draft. So if we have any Ardon Key fans, go back a 4th year, there's Jadeveon Clowney. So if we do have any Ardon Key fans, don't be like, oh, you're disrespecting the Ardon Key here, not having him in the top 5. I'll be honest, right now in my mock draft, and this is me getting away from the players just to justify myself a little bit, I'm heavy on the quarterbacks. Jets may not take a quarterback. 49ers may not take a quarterback. 49ers may trade back if they get the number 1 pick because they might get Kirk Cousins and might not need a Sam Darnold. But that is it from the NFL guy on this side of the table. Last 2 guys I want to mention before we wrap this whole thing up is they're both cornerbacks. We've got Minkah Fitzpatrick going to the Bills at 6, Tavares McFadden out of Florida State, number 9 to the Broncos. I'm going to ask you, Brandon, like, who else am I going to ask? No one else is here. Which one of these cornerbacks in your eyes will be the top cornerback coming out into the 2018 NFL draft?
Minkah Fitzpatrick.
No bias, of course.
None.
No Alabama bias here.
None. No, Minkah Fitzpatrick has just been so, I would say, so dominant, so locked down. He has shown so many good things while he's been there in his time at Alabama. And it's not to say, again, that anyone else isn't going to be good, but when you put Fitzpatrick against McFadden, I just think Fitzpatrick has to win that one each time. And where you have him going to the Bills, I don't necessarily know if I agree with that, but having him atop there, that wouldn't be too far off.
Now, let me ask you this, because you're the Alabama guy. You can answer this better than I would. If you look at, because some people might say, well, Ricky, I'm looking at the McShay prospect rankings that you are. Fitzpatrick on some mock drafts listed as a cornerback. I have him listed as one. There are some, like Todd McShay, that have him listed as a safety. Where would you list him, safety or corner?
Well, it's funny that at another spot,
or is he a Jalen Ramsey and he can do both?
At another spot, I've seen him listed as a defensive back. So I see him as a cornerback.
Mainly as a cornerback.
I see him as a cornerback, and you know, he's a guy who in his freshman campaign had 45 total tackles, and sophomore campaign 66 total tackles. A guy who's able to have that many tackles and is able to get the number of interceptions that he did, especially this last year with 6, which really helped him stand out above the rest. You almost think, well, that's just not a safety. That's not even just a cornerback. He's a. I don't want to say he's the same type of guy that you got when who was playing for Michigan.
With Jabril?
Yes, Peppers, but similar.
Yeah,
very similar.
He's not that. Jabril was more of that star linebacker safety position, where Minkah Fitzpatrick is not that. When I see these two guys, and kind of my little hot take before we push on to the next segment, the main reason I had Fitzpatrick above McFadden is Fitzpatrick is the more developed. Like, he's still developing, but he is more developed than McFadden, to where if I'm taking one, who can I plug into my defense and be more for sure of how is he going to be year one, it's Fitzpatrick. The main thing McFadden has to do, kind of shore up that frame right now, like 6'2", 198 pounds is not the best frame. He needs to fill that frame out, but otherwise McFadden has everything I want in a quarterback as well. Can run with the receiver, can disrupt the receiver, can diagnose the play on the field, can read the quarterback well. So both these guys are great as defensive backs. That's why I'm looking more towards Fitzpatrick right now, because to me he's more complete. He's got less things that need to be there, but McFadden also has the skills. It's just his frame is my biggest weakness right now. But we've got about 2 minutes. Give me your last takes on anything you want.
Well, I was going to say I completely agree with that too, in the fact of what you were saying about Minkah Fitzpatrick, because in his year one, he played 14 games. McFadden played in 2.
Yeah.
So when you say that he's more developed and Minkah has come, I shouldn't say along better, I should say along quicker. He's at a different spot than McFadden is.
Yeah.
But McFadden could still have a good season this
No,
year,
he could.
and everyone could say, throw it out the window. He's good. But what I'm saying is that you're completely right in saying that. And if a team wants to go for a guy who's a little bit more seasoned, which again, that sometimes that doesn't matter, you may just want to go for the guy who you feel is the better raw talent and who will make more of an impact for your team. But if you're going for the guy who's more seasoned, Minkah Fitzpatrick is your pick. And you cannot forget, though, this past year with McFadden with 8 interceptions, he had an outstanding season. But he is certainly at a different spot than what Fitzpatrick is at.
And that's exactly why I had McFadden going with the Broncos, because I could see John Elway kind of being like, hey, Talib, it was nice having you. You injured Wes Welker in a playoff game one year, but you know what? You're getting old. It's time to go. McFadden's going to be the guy to come in. But we are going to move on. But before we do, let us know down below in the comment section, what do you guys think? Any of the players that were in my draft we didn't talk about? Any of the guys we did talk about? Let us know what you guys are thinking down below in the comment section.